Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity, because here you will find curiosities. I'm White Buckner with the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we travel just a little south into Tony's Trading Post, a taxidermy lover's paradise. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Here to tell us more about this trading post in Wrenshall, I'm joined again by News Tribune reporter Terry Caddo. Terry, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so Terry, what exactly is this place, and what interested you about the story?
So this is kind of a unique place because it's a taxidermy place where they don't make their own taxidermy. That's not the goal of this place. What they do is they buy and they collect other people's collection of taxidermy, and they sell it to people who are interested in buying those pieces. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of deer heads, a lot of mounts, a lot of fish, also just a lot of every kind of animal you can pretty much imagine, as long as it's legal to buy and sell. It's kind of a unique place in that it collects other people's taxidermy, and then so it's kind of a unique idea. It's not your typical taxidermy spot, but it is definitely, like you said, taxidermy lover's paradise. There's just about, you can find whatever you're looking for there.
As you can see, I sell a lot of stuff. I mean, I have right down to $1 and $2 trinkets, rabbit's feet, arrowheads, all the way up to moose heads for thousands of dollars. And I sell leather gloves, deerskin, leather gloves and choppers, and we sell tons of them at the fairs. But the oddity shows is a little different. It's more skulls, bones. The odd stuff sells better there. It all sells. People buy everything.
So that was Tony Shutta. He is the owner of Tony's Trading Post.
Yeah, walking through there, it's very expansive space. You, myself, and photographer Jed Carlson up there and got to see the collection firsthand. It's quite expansive, and it's kind of shocking. It shouldn't be shocking, but it's kind of shocking to hear how most of it is, in fact, real.
He's got a couple of reproductions of things that are a little more rare, a little more hard to come by, but a lot of it is 100% real. He talks about himself, about how you can definitely tell the difference. If you're into this sort of a thing, you can look at something and almost instantly know that's real, that's not.
There isn't much I have not sold in the last 30 years. I mean, all the common stuff, we've sold all that. Everything from raccoons to moose and a lot of the African animals. I mean, a lot of it's regulated more now than it was. So like lions, we can't sell lions anymore, but we used to sell a lot of lions. Big bears, big moose, hippos. I just sold a hippo a couple weeks ago. I have a walrus in the trailer. That's some of the more unique and unusual items. Almost everything in here is real. The walrus I mentioned is a reproduction walrus. You run into some regulations with certain animals. Some animals can't leave the state of Minnesota, and some animals you can't even buy and sell. So you got to know your regulations everywhere you go from state to state to make sure you're not accidentally breaking the law, because you're not going to break the law for a few dollars. But yeah, almost everything's real. They do make a lot of reproductions of everything now, but reproductions do not sell as good as real. You can just tell. You can't make fake fur look real. Anyone who knows can tell right away.
So Terry, what was it exactly about the story that interested you and drew you to it in the first place?
So I have a friend who's really into the kind of oddities and curiosities side of taxidermy and skull collecting and such like that. And as soon as I read about this place, I read the description on Tony's website, immediately went like, Katie would love this place. This is 100% up her alley. This is definitely a place that she would want to check out. So I figured I'd go check it out at least ahead of time and also get a really cool story out of it.
So let's talk about our visit up there. So just to be very, very clear to anyone who's listening, this is not an actual physical trading post in regards to like that you can just show up at unannounced and just shop around. Like this is very much on private property down in Wrenshall, and it makes it very clear that you are entering not a public space that you can just show up at. Like we drove there separately, and I got there right before you, and there's a sign that says, private property, and I'm like, okay, I think I have the right address. Keep driving. There's more signs that say you are now trespassing. There's some other colorful signs that make it very clear that you are pushing forward at your own risk.
Yeah.
And for me, because I had not set up the story, I got a little fearful that I was in the wrong place, and there was not really much service, couldn't get a hold of you. But then I saw you right behind me, and then I felt instantly better.
Yeah, where I went in, I'm like, I've talked to him. He knows we're coming. This is like the one day in between trade shows, because he was just coming from a trade show and going to pack up and go to another one. So I was like, he knows we're coming. This is set. We're okay.
Yeah, meanwhile, photographer Jed was just already up there, completely just no fear whatsoever.
Already grabbing photos, already endeared himself.
Yeah, I was the coward one. That was a little more nervous.
We were fine.
Oh, no. And it was all perfectly fine. But the point is that you can't just show up there unannounced. It is not that kind of store.
It's definitely a place you want to call first. Give him a call, talk to him, send him an email, let him know what you're looking for. I think he would still let you come out if you were, but he'd want to know ahead of time. And he does a lot more shipping. And they do an awful lot of shipping. He said something about shipping 300 deer mounts in the last year.
I do a lot of online sales. We sell on eBay. I have a website, littletonystradingpost.com. So I'm shipping out every week, some weeks every day. And I also go to a lot of shows. I do the Minnesota State Fair, the Wisconsin State Fair, big sport shows. And now the last few years we've been doing oddities shows, oddities and curiosity shows all over the country, selling all of this stuff.
Now, I'm sure contributing to possibly the reason why, or a reason why, it doesn't just let anyone just show up and just browse around shop, is that it's not exactly like a well-organized... And I feel okay saying that because he's said just as much, that it's not necessarily what you would see in a normal storefront in terms of the layout.
Right. It's definitely much a storage place. It's a place where he keeps everything. I will say, I think there is an organized chaos. I think he's got a system. I think he knows the system and nobody else knows the system. Or maybe him and maybe anyone else in his family who's out there. But pretty much it's a lot of things everywhere. It's not a place you want to walk through necessarily unguided, for sure. He did even say himself that he finds things in there sometimes that he forgot he had or didn't even know he had.
Well, as you can see, it's kind of a mess and it gets a little hard. I've got a general idea of what I have always. And once stuff gets lotted in for internet sales, it's all hung up, tagged. You know, I know where all that is. I do get surprised when I dig through my piles sometimes and find something I forgot I had.
So let's just talk briefly about what are some of the things that we saw when we were walking through there.
I had a lot of fun with the raccoons that you can see in the little birch boat. He had some birch boats that he bought from a different company that was closing down, and a friend of his has been positioning these raccoons in them so they look like they're fishing. That was pretty adorable. Any kind of animal that you're looking for, they're pretty much there. A lot of huge varieties, some ibex, a lot of deer, some bears, a lot of fish up on the wall. There's the fish wall that's just filled top to bottom with different types of fish of any size and shape. I believe there's even like a fish from a Wisconsin senator or state senator. This was, you may not have heard that, but sorry.
Yeah, I missed that part.
That was me and Jed up near
Really?
the front. It was a fish that he'd had in his collection that after he passed, they wanted to sell it, so they gave it to him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I guess you can imagine a lot of the pieces in there surely have a history behind them, especially if they were real.
Yeah, every piece in there is somebody wanted that specific animal preserved for some reason, either because they killed it themselves or it was something that they had loved or something that they just wanted to have up on display. Everything in there, that was somebody deciding to get this piece taxidermied. And I will say he did mention that nowadays it is probably cheaper to buy a piece like that from someone like him than to try and get it done yourself because the cost is kind of prohibitive.
Gotcha. So talk to me about the history of the trading post, because the Tony we spoke to is he part of a line of Tonys? Yeah. As he said, he's the fourth Tony.
He's the fourth Tony. His father was Tony. His father's father was Tony. And I believe his father before him had worked in the fur trade industry as well.
In the 1980s, when the fur market was strong, all the fur just got sold in the fur industry. And then when the fur market crashed, we had to do something else with the furs. We had to figure out new markets. So we started doing some taxidermy, selling stuff, peddling it here and there. And that grew and grew and grew to where we don't even dabble with the fur industry anymore. Now we're just buying and selling taxidermy, antlers. We still sell furs, but we don't get them from the trappers anymore. We source them at the fur auctions or elsewhere.
And how did the current Tony, when did he get involved in terms of the ownership and running it? And
well, he grew up in the business and then he took it over, I believe, and he said in 2002 was the first year that he was the one running the business.
Gotcha. So talk to me about the Tony himself, the one we talked to, and his kind of involvement with it and his, I guess, general interest or him as a character, I suppose.
It's something that he said he truly loves. He likes doing what he does. He gets much more enjoyment out of it than he thinks doing anything else. It's something that he grew up and it's in his family, it's in his blood. He had an uncle who was, I think he said at one time, the biggest fur trader in Iowa. So it's something that he truly enjoys, and you can kind of hear that as you hear him talk about it and his passion for it, for sure. It shines through in his personality.
it means a lot. I'm the fourth Tony, and my grandfather dabbled a little bit in this too. And my great uncle, so my dad's uncle, was at one time the biggest fur buyer in the United States in Iowa. So it runs in the family, and I believe when they say it runs in your blood, and couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I really enjoy this, and it means a lot. And my dad's looked at what I've done, and he's very proud because I've made it and expanded it way bigger than any of us ever thought it could be.
Yeah, and we have to talk for a moment about his skull collection, or at least
Yeah.
tell me about the skull collection.
So he himself has his own personal skull collection where he says he would love to have one skull from every kind of animal that he's legally allowed to own. I will say it is very hard these days to get into his skull collection because he has just about everything he's wanted. It takes something that's really kind of freaky or weird or abnormal or just bigger or better than what he's got in order to make it in. Like we saw some giraffe skulls that were very unique and interesting because you don't think of seeing like a giraffe skull on average every day.
No, definitely not.
No.
You definitely don't see that every day.
No. And Jed said, well, that looks like it would definitely end up. And he said, no, I've got a better one.
Yeah, imagine like the kind of collection that where these massive giraffe skulls from Africa don't make the cut.
No, that's every day to him. He's just like, nah, they're fine. I got a better one.
That's both really impressive, but also really terrifying to a certain extent.
It's a little bit. And I will say it's kind of fun. He does very much get into the skull side of things more lately just because of the fact that he's dealing more in the curiosities and oddities markets, which there are these big expos that happen in major cities, like the Twin Cities has one coming up. And so it's a place where a lot of people like odd things like animal skulls and such like that.
At this point, I've got a very extensive skull collection, and so it's got to be unusual, either freaky or weird, or something I don't have, which is not very much. And it's hard to get into my collection anymore. And then I do sell a lot. So, or if it's bigger or better than one, then I'll swap them out. I would like to have a skull from every animal in the world. Everything that I can legally own, I want.
Based off our conversation with him, what would you say is the interest of this taxidermy? I know at one point we talked about how for a lot of taxidermy, it's like, some people would say like, why would you ever want to buy something that you didn't hunt yourself or get yourself? And he kind of talked about the comparison to say like owning a painting, where people will buy paintings for their home, but they didn't paint it themselves. And so he kind of compared that how that kind of relates to taxidermy. Just because you didn't hunt it yourself and bag it yourself, that it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily want it as your part of your decoration, your decor, or what have you.
Well, and he also talked a bit about how some people put it in their more public areas of their house. Like maybe they have their own deer mount that they caught them, they shot themselves and they really treasure, but they have this part of their house that they have more public facing that they don't want it to disappear out of. They talked about people who have like vacation homes or whatnot. They don't want to put their very precious items. They want a more generic, not generic, but a little more common piece that they can pick up and they can put in there. He definitely mentioned also that taxidermy is something that has a wide range of customers. It's not a type. It's for just about anyone.
So you guys talk to me about what was, after we visited there and talked with him, what would you say was your biggest takeaway from the story and why you feel like it fits really well and that it kind of belongs in Northlandia?
I think the biggest thing for me is it's just a very unique and eclectic collection of items that you don't see anywhere else, at least not locally. You'd have to travel for a bit to see some of these things. And he's just an interesting dude with a really interesting job. And those are some of my favorite types of stories is here's this person, this is what they do, and they are really fun to talk to. Like he had a lot to say and he shared it very well.
Gotcha. And before we wrap it up here, of all the pieces we looked through, what would you say was one that stood out to you the most, or the one that kind of, if you had to pick a favorite out of all of them, or most memorable one, what would you pick?
Probably the deer head with a tongue sticking out. That was kind of creepy, but I kind of loved it at the same time because he said that's like part of the deer that it was an older style head that they had mounted, and that's what it is. I'm like, that's really weird, but I also kind of love it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go a little basic with mine. The obvious choice being the raccoons and the
I mean,
canoe.
I love the
It's
raccoons,
such an obvious choice,
but I already
though.
mentioned it, so I didn't want to repeat it.
It's just so unique. Everything else in there, at least to me, looks like it's like, it's the animal that's like standing up, but this one's like a full blown like
yeah, that's fair enough.
unique display.
Though I did also really love there's like a squirrel on the side of a tree trunk that looks like it looks like a squirrel chasing up a tree, as you would see. As well as I love the fact that when we suddenly turned around at one point, there's just this massive, I don't remember, was it black or a brown bear? I think it was a brown bear in the trailer behind us. And it's like, I didn't even notice that as we were coming in. It's just this huge bear there. Okay.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, Terry. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back again soon.
I look forward to coming back.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as see photos by Jed Carlson and video produced by myself, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. Next week, News Tribune reporter Jimmy Loverin returns to introduce us to a group of Northlanders passionate about pinball. You can find all the episodes of Northlandia on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe could have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnew's.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.